Before humans wrote their first words, before they planted their first seeds of wheat, and long before they built the very first mud brick villages, they did something completely irrational. They knelt, they closed their eyes and prayed to forces they could not see, touch, or hear. Evolutionary archaeologists have uncovered evidence of ritual behaviors and religious practices dating back 45,000 to 200,000 years deep into the Middle Paleolithic era. This means that beliefs in the supernatural were active tens of thousands of years before the invention of agriculture. No one taught them to do this. No one wrote down scriptures or handed them holy books. So why did ancient humans, scattered across a wild and dangerous planet, all independently decide that there was something larger than themselves watching from the shadows? To find the earliest traces of this spiritual awakening, we have to look at how our ancestors treated their dead. In the animal kingdom, death is met with almost universal indifference. A lion will walk past the carcass of its pride mate without a second glance. A chimpanzee mother might carry her dead infant for a few days, but eventually she drops it in the dust and moves on. To animals, a dead body is simply organic matter, a shell that has lost its utility. But at some point in our evolutionary history, corpses stopped being treated like trash. They became sacred. This shift represents one of the most significant behavioral deviations in the history of life on Earth. These burial rituals show that humans had begun to look at the physical body and realize that something essential was missing. This was not just about hiding a rotting corpse from predators. It was about journeying. In archaeological digs spanning the globe, early graves are filled with grave goods. Archaeologists have found weapons, intricate bone jewelry, stone tools, and even traces of food buried alongside the skeletal remains. If ancient humans believed that death was the absolute end of existence, these burials would be an enormous waste of resources. In a world where making a single stone hand axe took hours of intense labor, burying it in the dirt with a corpse was a massive sacrifice. They did it because they believed the deceased still needed these tools. They believed the dead had not ceased to exist, but had simply moved to another realm. The presence of grave goods is the ultimate physical proof of a belief in the afterlife. The earliest evidence of this behavior comes from the archaeological site of Atapuerca in northern Spain. Inside a deep cave system at a location called Cima de los Huesos, or the Pit of Bones, researchers had to crawl on their hands and knees through narrow, mud-slicked passages to reach a 13-meter vertical shaft. At the bottom of this pit, they found the fossilized remains of over 28 individuals of Homo heidelbergensis dating back 400,000 years. Among these ancient, scattered bones, archaeologists discovered a single, beautifully crafted hand axe made of rare red quartzite. The tool was named Excalibur and showed absolutely no signs of wear, suggesting it had never been used for butchery or woodwork. It had been carefully placed in the pit as a deliberate ritual offering to the dead. Further down the evolutionary timeline, in Kafze Cave in Israel, researchers found 90,000-year-old human skeletons buried with red ochre and marine shells, and at Shanidar Cave in Iraq, Neanderthals were buried on beds of wild flowers. If these ancient humans did not believe in something beyond death, why would they bury weapons, ornaments, and flowers with those who would never breathe again? To see how deep the roots of this ritual behavior go, we have to look at another hominin species, the Neanderthals. In 2016, researchers studying Bruniquel Cave in southwestern France made a staggering discovery. Over 300 meters deep inside the cave, far beyond the reach of natural light, they found complex circular structures built from nearly 400 broken stalagmites. These stone rings, arranged in concentric circles, are dated to approximately 176,000 years ago, long before modern Homo sapiens arrived in Europe. The Neanderthals who constructed them had to bring fire deep underground to light their work, and researchers found evidence of burnt bones inside the circles. This suggests that the structures were built for symbolic or ritual purposes. It proves that ritualized deep cave assemblies were not exclusive to modern humans, but were a shared cognitive legacy that goes back hundreds of thousands of years. This deep-seated belief in the supernatural raises a major question. Is the human brain naturally programmed to believe in gods? Evolutionary anthropologists have proposed a two-stage theory to explain this phenomenon. The theory suggests that our ancestors first evolved specific mental mechanisms that were highly useful for basic physical survival and reproduction. Then, in the second stage, these survival mechanisms accidentally misfired, creating a natural tendency to believe in spirits, ghosts, and deities. Religious belief, in this view, is not a direct adaptation itself, but an evolutionary byproduct of cognitive tools designed to keep us from being eaten on the savannah. One of these core survival tools is the theory of mind. This is the cognitive ability to attribute mental states such as desires, beliefs, and intentions to others. It allowed early humans to navigate complex social hierarchies by guessing what their neighbors were thinking. However, this system was so highly active that human brains began projecting it onto non-living things. When raindrops fell, they were not seen as water condensing in the atmosphere. Ancient humans assumed the raindrops were acting with purpose, falling because the sky wanted to wet the earth. If a volcano erupted, the mountain was acting out of anger. If the wind howled through the trees, it was a spirit expressing its sorrow. Every shadow, every storm, and every change in the weather was gauged as an intentional action by a conscious mind. This cognitive overprojection is the foundation of animism, the oldest form of human religion. Our ancestors believed that spirits inhabited everything: the sun, the wind, the rivers, and the trees. Because they believed these natural forces had conscious minds, they realized they had to interact with them the same way they interacted with other humans. If you want a neighbor to help you, you give them a gift or speak to them kindly. If you want the rain spirit to water your crops, you perform a ritual, offer sacrifices, and show respect. Worship began as a pragmatic strategy to appease these powerful natural forces, turning a cold and chaotic universe into a giant network of relationships where ancient humans could negotiate for their survival. This evolutionary programming is so powerful that it remains dominant even in our modern scientific world. Today, nearly 6 billion people, representing 84% of the global population, identify with a formal religion. Even in highly secularized societies, supernatural belief does not disappear. Statistical surveys show that even among people who self-identify as atheists, 1 in 5 still believes in a higher power, a cosmic force, or a spiritual energy. We have built particle accelerators and sent probes to the edge of the solar system, yet the vast majority of our species still feels, deep down, that there is a conscious intent behind the universe. Our brains are still running the Pleistocene default code. But belief in gods did not just help ancient humans explain the natural world, it also solved a massive social problem. As human groups grew larger, keeping order became increasingly difficult. In a small band of 30 hunter-gatherers, everyone knew everyone. If someone stole meat, lied, or refused to help with the hunt, the rest of the group would immediately punish them through gossip, mockery, or banishment. But as communities expanded, people had to interact with strangers. Without face-to-face accountability, the incentive to cheat, steal, and act selfishly skyrocketed. This is the freerider problem, and it has destroyed countless human groups throughout history. To prevent this social collapse, religion evolved to include moralizing forces. By extending social surveillance to include all-seeing spirits, ancestors, and deities, human societies found an incredibly effective way to curb selfishness. If you stole from a neighbor when no one was looking, you might escape human justice, but you could not hide from the gods. The gods would strike you down with disease, ruin your crops, or punish your children. This shared belief acted as a psychological police force. It forced individuals to behave honestly and cooperatively even when they were completely alone. The idea of the divine eye watching from above became the ultimate social glue. This psychological surveillance gave religious groups a massive evolutionary advantage. A tribe whose members believed in an all-seeing deity would cooperate much more effectively than a group that did not. They would share food more reliably, fight together more courageously, and build stronger communities. In the brutal game of prehistoric survival, the cooperative group would easily outcompete and destroy the selfish group. The adaptive value of religion was not about saving individual souls. At its origin, belief in gods was a practical social technology designed to keep the tribe from splintering into chaos. The groups that survived were the ones that feared the gods. For decades, historians and archaeologists believed they knew exactly how civilization started. The standard theory, popularized in the 20th century, was simple. First, humans invented agriculture. This allowed them to settle down in permanent villages and produce food surpluses. Once they had extra food, they could support specialists like priests, which led to the creation of organized religion and the construction of temples. Religion was seen as a luxury product of agricultural wealth. But in 1994, a discovery in southeastern Turkey completely shattered this timeline, reversing everything we thought we knew about the birth of civilization. Göbekli Tepe is a massive stone temple complex dating back 11,500 years, constructed around 9,500 BCE in southeastern Turkey. The site consists of dozens of T-shaped limestone pillars, some standing up to 5 meters tall and weighing between 10 and 20 tons. These pillars are arranged in precise, concentric circles and are beautifully carved with reliefs of predatory beasts, snarling lions, wild boars, scorpions, and venomous snakes. What makes this site mind-blowing is that it was built entirely by pre-agricultural hunter-gatherers. The people who dragged these massive stones from nearby quarries had no metal tools, no wheels, no writing, and no domesticated beasts of burden to assist them. They did not even have permanent houses. They were nomadic bands who joined forces for a massive ritual purpose. Before Göbekli Tepe was excavated, the idea of nomadic hunter-gatherers building monumental stone architecture was considered impossible. Yet, the oldest archaeological layers at the site, dating to Layer 3, show no evidence of domestic life. There are no hearths, no trash pits filled with domestic waste, and no permanent living quarters. The structures were purely ceremonial. The houses, domestic tools, and agricultural remains only appear in much later, shallower layers of the site. This physical evidence proves that ancient humans gathered in large numbers to perform religious rituals long before they ever built towns or planted crops. This discovery completely reverses the traditional arrow of history. It was not agriculture that created religion. It was religion that forced the birth of agriculture. To construct a monument of the scale of Göbekli Tepe, hundreds of people from different nomadic bands had to gather and work together for months. Feeding this massive, gathered workforce was an impossible challenge using wild game and berries alone. To survive the construction process and complete their rituals, they had to find a more reliable food source. Genetic mapping of wild einkorn wheat has shown that its closest wild relative still grows on the slopes of the Karakada Mountains, located just 30 kilometers from Göbekli Tepe. The need to feed the temple builders drove the domestication of wheat. They began planting the wild grains systematically to ensure they could keep building their monument. And Göbekli Tepe was not an isolated miracle. In 2021, the Turkish government and international archaeologists launched the Taş Tepeler project, coordinating excavations across a dozen contemporary Neolithic sites in the same region. Among these, Karahan Tepe, located 63 kilometers away, is the sister site of Göbekli Tepe. It contains similar T-shaped anthropomorphic pillars, but with a fascinating difference. Many of its structures were carved directly into the natural limestone bedrock itself. Crucially, Karahan Tepe shows clearer evidence of daily residential areas alongside its monumental ritual spaces. This proves that southeastern Turkey was home to an extensive, interconnected regional network of ritual centers. Pre-agricultural humans were not wandering in isolated, disconnected bands. They were part of a large-scale, culturally unified society that shared the same complex worldview and symbolic language. This leaves researchers with a fascinating debate. Was religion a biological byproduct or a direct evolutionary adaptation? The byproduct model argues that religious beliefs are simply the side effects of cognitive systems that evolved for other survival tasks, like reading faces and detecting predators. In this view, our brains are just prone to evolutionary glitches that make us see spirits in the wind. The adaptation model, however, argues that religion was actively selected for because it allowed humans to scale up their societies. Without the shared mythology of the gods, we could never have transitioned from tiny family bands to massive empires. It was the only tool capable of coordinating millions of strangers. In fact, the evolutionary roots of ritual behavior might even predate our split from other primates. Scientists at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology have observed wild chimpanzees in West Africa performing a behavior called accumulative stone throwing. In Guinea and Guinea-Bissau, chimps repeatedly hurl rocks at specific trees, leaving piles of stones at their bases. There is no biological or survival reason for this behavior. It is not done to extract food. Interestingly, the chimps specifically choose resonant trees that produce a loud, booming sound when struck, which carries signals through the dense forest. Some primatologists suggest that this behavior shows the evolutionary scaffolding of ritual, the repetitive, socially learned action of creating a significant landmark. It indicates that the biological foundation of ritual, the habit of marking specific spaces as special through non-functional actions, was already in place millions of years ago. Beyond social scaling, this cognitive program offered a powerful biological placebo effect. Life in the ancient world was filled with trauma, disease, and sudden death. Without modern medicine, the chronic stress of survival would have been psychologically crippling. Chronic stress floods the body with cortisol, which damages the immune system and increases mortality. Collective rituals, chanting, and prayer acted as biological stress relievers. Neuroimaging studies show that intense prayer or meditation deactivates the default mode network in the brain, reducing anxiety and inducing feelings of peace. By giving humans a framework to make sense of tragedy, belief in gods lowered their physiological stress, protected their immune systems, and literally kept them alive. This collective ritual action also triggered direct chemical changes in the brain. When people participate in synchronized activities like group dancing, chanting, or shared prayer, their brains release massive amounts of endorphins and oxytocin. This chemical cocktail lowers social anxiety and increases empathy, temporarily dissolving the boundaries of the individual self. It makes a group of unrelated strangers feel like biological siblings. This neurochemical bonding allowed early humans to form larger, more cohesive groups that could build cities, dig massive irrigation systems, and defend their territories. Once a society adopted a moralizing big god and reinforced it with costly rituals, it became culturally unstoppable. To ensure that members of a community were not faking their belief in these all-seeing gods, religions developed costly rituals. Under costly signaling theory, a behavior is only a reliable signal of commitment if it is difficult or painful to perform. Anthropologist Richard Sosis studied this by analyzing the survival rates of historical communes. He found that religious communes, which demanded strict rituals, dietary restrictions, and daily prayers, survived much longer than secular communes. Sosis also studied Israeli kibbutzim, discovering that religious members who engaged in visible, costly daily prayers were significantly more cooperative in economic games than secular members. The cost of the ritual acts as a barrier to entry, keeping out untrustworthy individuals who might exploit the group. This explains why ancient rituals often escalated to extreme levels of sacrifice. In Carthage, during times of military siege or environmental crisis, the elites practiced child sacrifice to the god Moloch. Under costly signaling theory, giving up a child is the ultimate, impossible-to-fake demonstration of loyalty to the state. By participating in this horrific ritual, the ruling class proved to the population that they were entirely committed to the collective survival of Carthage. The shared trauma bonded the community, preventing internal panic and rebellion when the city was threatened. It was a dark, extreme manifestation of the same social technology that kept early societies from falling apart. As societies grew, the structure of the spirit world shifted from small-scale negotiation to cosmic warfare. In ancient Persia, Zoroaster introduced the concept of cosmic dualism, dividing the universe into absolute good and absolute evil. The old gods were no longer entities you bargained with for rain. They became soldiers in a war between light and darkness. This transition changed human morality. Before, you behaved well to avoid immediate social shame or a lightning strike. Now, your actions had cosmic significance. You were required to choose a side in a war that would determine the fate of the universe. This dualism was inherited by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, turning morality into a cosmic duty. We still carry the scars of this evolutionary transition today. Even in our modern, secular societies, we are constantly looking for meaning in random events. When a tragedy occurs, we still ask what we did to deserve it. When we experience good luck, we feel grateful, even if we do not know who we are thanking. Our brains are still running the ancient software of the savannah, still trying to read the mind of the storm, still freezing when the floorboards creak in the dark. We conquered the wilderness, built cities of glass, and sent rockets to the moon. But the program that created the gods is still running inside us, quiet, hyperactive, and waiting. Even the most hardened skeptics among us still participate in rituals. We knock on wood to prevent bad luck. We avoid walking under ladders. We make wishes when we blow out birthday candles. We carry lucky charms or wear specific jerseys when our favorite sports team is playing. These behaviors are functionally identical to the dances our ancestors performed to bring rain. They are attempts to negotiate with the unseen forces of the world. They are small, low-risk investments to buy a little bit of control over an unpredictable future. We might think we have outgrown the temples, but the architects who built them are still alive inside us. Tens of thousands of years before the first word was written, ancient humans looked up at the sky and asked, "Is there anyone looking back down?" That question never truly disappeared. We did not need to be taught to believe in the supernatural. It is the default setting of the human brain, a product of 3 million years of survival and the social architecture that allowed us to build the modern world. If you want to understand the mystery of our origins, you have to look at the monuments we left behind. We will explore those ancient temples and the bizarre burial rituals of our Neanderthal cousins in our next videos. That's all for today. Anyway, please donate a subscribe to fund the next video.